Hi you guys, it's Danny from Orchid Nature. So my viewer Wade is asking me what type of medium I use with what type of orchids. So today I will talk about what type of mediums go better with what type of orchids. Now first things first, the type of medium you're gonna use will depend on your environment. So if you have a warm and dry environment, more water retentive medium will work better for you. And if you have a cold and not so sunny and rather humid environment, then you should pick something that doesn't retain as much water. I, on the other hand, have a bit of both, in the sense that in the wintertime it's very cold and humid, and in the summertime it's very hot and very dry. So I have to be careful how I water, how frequent I water, and what type of medium I'm using. So for those of you who have similar conditions, maybe this will give you some ideas. So okay, I'll tell you what type of mediums I use for what orchids. Now for the most common orchid of all, which is the Phalaenopsis orchid, I usually go only for bark medium, as you can see. Now Phalaenopsis orchids do love quite a lot of ventilation around the roots, and this bark medium seems to be to their liking, but in the summertime I do have to water about maybe 3 times a week. In the wintertime it's good, I can go up to 10 days without watering. Now the thing is, if I would use something more water retentive, it would be tons better in the summertime, but in the wintertime I might have some root rot problems. So yeah, that's the thing. If your environment is constantly dry, then maybe a mixture with coconut husk will work better. I am actually thinking of introducing just a bit of coconut husk because I'm sick of watering. But in the wintertime, the bark medium is just great. But most of my Phalaenopsis orchids are potted in bark medium, and they absolutely love it as long as I remember to water them. For Oncidiums and Oncidium intergenerics, I usually go with a mixture between bark, chips, and coconut husk. Now this thing tends to hold more water and for a longer period of time, and Oncidiums do like to be constantly moist, not soggy but moist. They don't like to dry out too much between watering, so I find that this mixture works well, but in my environment in the summertime, using only coconut husk will work great. Not so sure in the wintertime, so I just do a mixture of bark chips and coconut husk. With Miltoniopsis orchids, I actually use many different types of mediums because I just want to try them out. Some of my Miltoniopsis are potted in bark, and they're doing fine. I just need to water them every 2 days, and it's a bit too much for me. Some of my other Miltoniopsis are potted in, sorry about that, coconut husk and just perlite, and they're doing good as well. I don't have to water so frequent, which is good. And right now I'm thinking of actually trying some bark with a little bit of sphagnum moss just to see how it goes. But usually Miltoniopsis orchids like to stay constantly moist, and yeah, the more water retentive the medium is, the better. Keep in mind though that ventilation in the pot is also important, so don't forget about the ventilation holes, and also a bit of perlite works wonders. For my Nobile Dendrobiums, I usually go with bark medium, but recently I started adding a bit of coconut husk to the media as well. So it's a mixture between quite a lot of bark chips and also a bit of coconut husk. And this is because these Dendrobiums drink a lot of water in the summertime, and if I only keep them in bark medium, I would have to water them every 3 days or something like that. So I guess a mixture between coconut husk and bark will go better than simply bark. My Calea orchids are planted only in bark medium, and sometimes I go with bark and a little bit of perlite. This is because in time bark medium will start to break down towards the bottom here after about a year and a half or something, and yeah, the perlite just keeps it more airy. For these types of orchids, I wouldn't necessarily go with something fine. I wouldn't go with something too water retentive. They do just fine with a drought, so I am actually using medium to big pieces of bark chips, and so far so good. Paphiopedilum orchids also have a mixture between bark chips and coconut husk, but I do add quite a little bit more coconut husk than in other cases. They do like to stay moist, to have a moist media, so I am really relying on coconut husk, and so far they seem to absolutely love it. Do you remember this guy? He's been in bloom for about 3 months now. Now, I never use sphagnum moss with any of my orchids, of my mature orchids actually, because it just doesn't do so great for me. But with these guys, which are tiny little cakeys that came off from a dendrobium. Also with seedlings, adding sphagnum moss is actually a savior. For these guys, I opted for pure sphagnum moss just because they were so tiny, they had no back bulbs, they were so fragile, and sphagnum moss actually provides the quantity of water they require, but these guys are the only ones in sphagnum moss, and I intend to switch them to a mixture of bark when they grow up, because when they're mature they will really hate sphagnum moss. Okay, hope I answered your question, and if you have other questions, just leave me a comment. Also, if you have suggestions or anything else, pop it in a comment, and if you like what you see, subscribe to my channel. Also, if you want to get in touch with me in our community, visit orchidnature.com. So I'll see you next time. Bye!